Praxis of Participation, a retro-prospection, is a platform for conversations around participation aimed at social equity and inclusion. It marks the celebrations of the 25 years of Praxis Institute for Participatory Practices. This edition is titled Digital Paradox: Participation in the Digital Era.
Hi, good afternoon. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Afternoon.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. I can see that, there are more than 75, 76 participants here. So I think we need to really talk very seriously and something very fruitful. A lot of people to make, something want to take home out of it. I am on my way to Bangalore. I'm sitting in a car and it's raining. And the digital paradox is that while I am connected and far away, we are able to do this conference, but at the same time, there are millions and millions of people who are not connected. So, today's session, and congratulations to Praxis for this 25 years of journey. It's very, very important because what digital needs to learn very strongly from you people is participation, and equitability and their say. And I think that is also something that we are going to discuss today. Thanks, Athena and Tarini and Tom for organizing this, for giving us an opportunity to come together. And thank you, Tamsil. You look very good with your background. Hi, Anya. You have a lovely background as well. And where is Sanchita? Yeah, here it is. Sanchita, how are you? Wonderful to see all of you. Four of us are going to make some sense out of this 1 hour, 30 minutes that we have. I will say just a couple of things in relation to this one, the digital paradox that we are going to discuss, is that India is the second highest connected country in the world. And yet out of 1.4 billion people, about 56 or 60% people are not connected. And that's a huge population. 64% of the population of 890 million rural India is not connected. And that I must mention in the perspective of Praxis and the participation perspective, that there is a huge population that is unconnected. And the reason why I'm mentioning that to also bring attention to the paradox is because about 10 years back, 15 years back, when internet and digital started, it didn't look like that we don't have an alternative, or even if digital is an alternative, we are not fully dependent on it, or we are pushed to it. It was more seen as an alternative. But today, when we say that hundreds and millions of people who are not connected, we cannot say that their life is not dependent on digital. And that is the paradox that we are going to discuss about today. That I am not connected, I am not interested, let's say, for being connected, and yet I cannot eat my food without being connected. I cannot have my right to education without being connected. I cannot have my right to health without being connected. I cannot have my entitlements without being connected. I cannot have my vaccination without being connected, and so on and so forth. I can go on and on. So what is it for a country like India, where we have 60% people unconnected, and those who are connected is also, functionally, are they connected or not? And in the middle of all this, how are we seeing this entire paradox of digital, and how does it lay to different aspects of our life? And by just bringing that backdrop, I will stop here, and we will, just for the logistic perspective, for all these 80 people who are here, we have planned to work out a very interactive session and not a long speech oriented session. So we will go one by one in a round with each one of the three main speakers. And we will have 3-4 major discussions to do. And to start with, I will go to Anya straightforward. And we were talking yesterday in preparation to talk to all of you, is also that what do we talk which actually pertain to the largest part of all of you. And one of the main thing that Anya said that we must talk about is data and society, datafication and society. And when we say data, obviously, when we say that data, obviously digital drives us to data, and data drives us to decision making, and how the entire society is affected by that one. So I'll come to Anya and say, Anya, can you really explain to all of us that how do you think Indian subcontinent or Indian society has been put to data, and the data is put to them, and how does it really laying out for all of them?
Thanks, Osama. And first of all, happy birthday to Praxis. I'm very happy to be here with you all today. It's a great occasion. Why I said yesterday to Osama that I thought we should speak about data is because if you look at the question of participation in the digital society, I really think we need to start by questioning at the level of the architecture at that society. At a very fundamental level, how things are working is changing, right? And so that's where we need to start from, and data really is a crucial aspect of that. Because if we look just at who has access to devices and who has not, then you think about inclusion and exclusion in the digital society in a way that's simply not correct. All of us are included, whether or not we actually have a device. At the moment, 99% of the Indian population is said to have an Aadhaar. If you have an Aadhaar, you're included in the digital society in the sense that your life has been datafied to a considerable extent, starting with your irises, your fingerprints, the way you need to authenticate to get access that you have guaranteed under Indian law. So there is something fundamentally changing here that is really irrespective of whether or not you have that device. The question is really then on whose terms are we being included, right? And what does that then mean for empowerment and participation that technology can potentially bring with it? And that question of on whose terms are we included is really important for everyone. Even for the most privileged persons, even for those who have access to devices. I'm thinking, for example, of recent news stories of Safai Karmacharis in several cities having been forced to use digital devices that basically track where they are throughout the day and also check whether they are present at work, whether they are the ones that are doing the work and not somebody else. The Safai Karmacharis have protested against these devices for a variety of reasons, including that they are afraid that their data is being taken in ways that they have no control over, that their privacy is being violated because some of these devices have cameras and it's not clear when they switch on and when they don't. Women being really concerned about taking those devices to bathrooms. People saying that now they have been marked as absent while they were present because somehow the connection wasn't working, the data wasn't being transferred. So their physical presence at the work site didn't actually matter anymore. It's an example of where, again, people supposedly have access, they are included, the devices are there, but the question of on whose terms has that happened is clearly not in favor of the people that we're now talking about, this marginalized group of Safai Karmacharis. It's true, even though, like I said, for the most privileged of us, I mean, all of us here, when we are asked to give consent online, we've all ticked those boxes without actually really understanding what this means, without actually really understanding where all our data goes. And then just being surprised, for example, when all of a sudden we see an ad pop up somewhere about something we've written an email about to somebody the day before, etc. And then just thinking, wow, there must be a connection here, but how did that happen? I had no idea. I'm giving these examples to really make clear the point that if you look at the level of architecture of the digital society, actually most of us have very little control over the terms in which we are included, over what data is collected, but also what is being done with the data. And so if you look at those popular catchphrases nowadays that are really like justifications for why datafication is a good thing, why this should be supported, unlocking the value of data is something that's often said, right? As if there is something inherently valuable about data just by getting it. The question really is, but unlocking value for who? And at the moment, it's very clear that those who have access to the data and the infrastructures that it's needed to collect it and store it is a very small group. It generally does not include the communities this data addresses themselves. And those who do have that access and infrastructure then have a disproportionate power. The consequences of that really go beyond what is being done with the data as such, so beyond questions of data protection or privacy, and also beyond questions of whether it might enrich some people rather than others, though that's important, of course. It really also, again, is about how datafication changes our society at a fundamental level. So to give one more example, when you look at Safai Karmacharis, right? Those devices have been introduced by the government in the name of efficiency. In fact, it's done in several cities where cities can get extra points from the government if they implement the scheme, supposedly to make sure that work is more efficient, workers show up, et cetera, et cetera. That's one set of values, which is really built into the architecture of how work is organized now. In addition to the earlier concerns about data protection and privacy concerns that I've mentioned earlier, the Safai Karmacharis themselves, though, also speak about questions of dignity. They see this as a modern shackle. They read this as actually a continuation of the way in which they were forced under the caste system to do a certain kind of work, and how similar pressures are now exerted on them again, but in a digital form. And that is a very different set of values, the question of dignity and how you recognize the history of the groups that most of the people who do this work today also belong to, the humanity of those stories and the recognition that needs to be given this. So what we see here is really two different set of values that are in many ways at odds with each other, but where one clearly wins out over the other. And so I think what this example also makes clear is that actually there is a much broader range of rights at stake if we look at the architecture of how this is put into place. I have some ideas also about, Osama, how we can start to shift this, but maybe let me stop here for now and we can come back to that later.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the way you are explaining about datafication and society, looks like that every person who is on digital or digital platform has an avatar and leaving each and every action which is being datafied and being consummated by in various ways. But let me go to Tamsil, and Tamsil was very keen to talk about one of the very strong aspects that is very visible and but may not be benefiting all, and which is that how internet has changed in the last 15-20 years into various platforms, and these platforms are actually converting into giving business opportunities, your presence opportunity, whatever you want to say, whatever you want to sell, whatever you want to have market, and so on and so forth. So from a perspective of even bottom up, there is a huge opportunity that is there because of the platform expansion and various options, taking digital to the level beyond literacy and education and actually diversifying. Tamsil, how would you explain and how do you really tell us about how internet has converted itself into platforms, and the platforms are in fact converting into pervasiveness of giving opportunity to huge number of people, and also the opportunity of for the lack of word I don't want to use, only business, but generally to say what you want to say.
So if I, first of all, I think a big happy birthday to Praxis. And if I'm dividing this, right, and let's start with this one point. There was a recent IMI report that actually said that India has a predicted 900 million internet users by about 2025, out of which 31% are predicted to be rural internet users. And before I get deeper into this, one of the things, if I'm actually dividing the platforms that are really changing the way livelihoods and access are actually happening in India, I divide them into 3 or 4 different parts, right? First being, you have big e-commerce giants like Amazon, Walmart, all these platforms that are coming up, right? Then you have digital payment ecosystems like UPI or the open network for direct commerce, which is being piloted right now in about 5 different cities, which actually allows anyone and everyone in a decentralized way to be able to sell their products as a small business owner as well. The third kind of platforms which have really taken forward, really big in India, is the regional short form video platforms. And that's something very unique to our country, because for the first time, people who do not have access to social media platforms, which are actually coming from US or coming from outside India, or even, they used to come from China as well, they're actually accessing short form video content in their own regional language and actually seeing more opportunities of income generation, right? Which actually brings me, so some of the short form video examples are Moj, ShareChat, Public, all these Indian platforms which have actually come up, which have huge number of users, specifically in smaller towns and rural areas. The third kind of thing which is really coming up right now is platforms like Jeevatam. I don't know if anyone has heard about Jeevatam. Jeevatam is this beautiful platform which actually is focusing on giving livelihoods to the most marginalized in India, and specifically training them to be able to find more and more gig opportunities and flexible work hours. It actually focuses a lot on women as well. And they have some amazing case studies where they're being able to connect a huge workforce, and they really boomed during COVID because they were marketing as to how many opportunities you can get. They've been able to generate thousands and thousands of livelihood opportunities by just using a platform and connecting people to brands that can actually give them opportunities that they didn't have before. And then you have an open network for direct commerce, which actually brings in a precedent where you have all these big platforms like Amazon, Walmart, all these players coming in who actually just have a section of their platform that prioritizes small businesses and MSMEs. But you have this platform which actually potentially, we haven't seen the results yet, could actually give everyone an access to be able to sell their products. Now, how this works from a perspective is the 2 big things that India is going to dominate. I'm going to separate social media and e-commerce and add a 3rd layer to it, which is creator economy. Like you mentioned, Osama, when we started this panel, that India has a really big internet population. And with the amount of people getting access to various platforms, right? And I haven't included the big tech ones like Facebook or Amazon. We have the creator economy platforms, which are giving opportunities to people to be able to earn livelihood, to simply creating stuff on social media. Now, here comes the interesting part when it comes to data and privacy, according to me as well, where a lot of young people, so to give you 2 examples from a livelihood perspective, we had this project called Social Saheli, right? In which we did this first pilot in UP, which was with about 200 self-help groups, right? Where the goal was to see people, women who are business owners who maybe own mobile phones, who don't have access to mobile phones, can actually create amazing content to promote their business beyond their village or district levels. And just out of that 200 cohort, we saw literally, like, if you look at the numbers, 10% of these women were able to increase 20% of bulk sales from people they had never met before. And now they've been able to expand their business even more by just telling simple stories on these platforms. The second kind of example, with a lot of young people who have been trying very hard to get jobs in various areas, have been able to create their own ecosystem where they're telling stories and being able to generate income by actually telling stories. To give a simple example, right? The third kind of thing, the biggest paradox we're going to face is at 2 levels, right? India also has a massive startup ecosystem, right? Which means there are literally about 65,000 startups which have been born out of the country. They have their own struggles of actually scaling up. Out of these thousands of startups, $3.5 billion worth of investments was just generated in literally last year and by January, and it's growing rapidly. And there's a paradox here again, is that you have this big tech world where you have these big companies coming in from US with their own privacy laws and stuff. And you have these Indian companies who are starting up and growing very rapidly, who face two kinds of challenges, right? The big, like you have existing platforms who really need to bring in some stringent data privacy safety policies that as platforms they can bring in. The second is startups who are really struggling to get access to data, where they can actually build an ecosystem around it. And the third thing is we just had a privacy bill which was brought in about a couple of years ago, but the lack of enactment of it is something that we really need to see how it takes care of two things. One, how do we protect our data? Second is, how do we make sure there's business prosperity, including livelihood generation for various communities? I'll stop here.
Yeah, Tamsil, thanks for that. And I was just thinking on a slightly more, negative manner, in the sense that all the creative economy comes out. We create a lot of content, a lot of individual, great local TikToks and local whatever. And then gradually Facebook comes and buys us out and then use all the data to start spreading hate speech and and start asking them to keep forwarding the information, which will create whatever. But I'm sure we are a society where we have to grow, and I'm going to come back to you on that one with the second question. Very, very interesting. I see that people are also commenting that very good conversation is going on. And now I'm going to Sanchita. Sanchita, you have this hat that you cannot take off, is that you bring all the rural knowledge, all the grassroots knowledge, all those things for years and years, having worked with Seva, so you are certainly going to expect us to tell stories of that, exactly what happens on the ground when we talk about digital inclusion, when we talk about digital skilling or digital literacy or digital jobs or digital enabling every person who wants a job or a livelihood. What is the local story of digital paradox? Is the local communities are benefiting from digital inclusion, or are they being threatened? Is this an opportunity, or is this a threat?
Thank you, Osama, for including me for the umpteenth time in your webinar. And thank you and congratulations, Praxis. Osama, when you started talking about this, when you were introducing this topic, I almost felt, and I think this is a reality, that our life depends on this digital. And if our life depends on digital, then I think one day we should also think that this should be also a human right. Now, if it is a human right, most of us do not have access. But since you wanted to hear about the story, I'm not going into too much data. We all know about the digital divide amongst gender, rural, urban, within the family, etc., etc. From Seva Bharat, we have a research team which comes under the Learning Hub. And in 2020, we thought, let us ask our women. Okay, I must also tell that I'm representing women in the informal economy. So we asked our women, what does this digital term mean to you? So it was very interesting. In Uttarakhand, women who are into homestays, they said good roadways and access to drinking water is digital. A domestic worker said the refrigerator and the microwave or the iron for ironing clothes is something she associates with digital. So various people said digital, what she means by digital. And of course, all of them did mention mobile as the first primary digital meaning, what they hold. So what I want to point out that the word digital to our women is about the usage of tools, platforms, technology, or objects. And again, this is again a factor of socioeconomic condition, the culture, or the type of work they are doing. And Anja, when you said that digitization started when we actually started enrolling everything into registering everybody in the Aadhaar card. And I was thinking, nobody mentioned Aadhaar card as a digital, what they mean by that. So that means many of them do not know the power or the position of the Aadhaar card. But our women were very happy to get themselves enrolled because the Aadhaar card started by giving them some kind of identity. Previously, they did not have any identity, at least that was an identity. So summing up their understanding, and I think this also brings some understanding of what our people would require from digital is ease of communication, efficiency of work, and information. This was more or less something that they expect from a digital change or a digital ecosystem. Now the digital ecosystem is just enlarged, but we were also very surprised. Most of the women did not link banking with digital. Now, we also saw that, see, their bank accounts are digitalized, their Aadhaar card is linked, many of them PAN cards are linked, but why they did not talk much about banking was they have not been able to use the digital platform in order to make any banking transactions or any functioning of the bank. We actually got in touch with NPCI and through a collaboration did quite a few trainings on UPI, because that was something we thought women in work, and all our women do work, that UPI would be a good platform that they should understand and use. First of all, we could, out of a population, we could only take 50%, because 50% had an access to smartphone. I'm not even talking about ownership. And the rest of the 50% did not. We could not do this training in a tribal area in Jharkhand because there were no towers for communication. So they are not included anyway. We understand that the feature phone allows you to understand your bank balance, but definitely it does not give you any further. For that, you need a digital tool. For the women to have a smartphone itself is challenging. Not only the access, what we also see that she needs to be trained continuously for the usage. She still depends on someone to do a financial transaction. She still is used to doing cash transaction. So all this digitalization has not created too much impact, or an impact which we are looking for. But the good part of it, where we see there is a pointed or a focused intervention, it does give result. We ourselves from Seva Bharat had a few projects like the Digital Beti, Digital Sakhi, and I will talk about another organization. But what happened with the Digital Beti was we were teaching all these women entrepreneurs to take up the digital platform. And immediately after that, COVID hit. So we thought that we should use this platform. So we started teaching them online how to use Facebook, how to use WhatsApp in order to talk about their products. But for that, we needed to teach them also to design, to have their own portfolio. So digital communication also helped these women to learn photography because they had to take their own photographs at that time. Digital communication, digital means also help them to reach markets. But when we have online platforms which needs onboarding for business, there are poor women suffer because many of them have an English language. Many of the languages are very digital types. So our women cannot use this. They need some assistance. In Seva, we have understood this gap. And that is where we try to bridge it by giving assistance in the form of hand-holding directly to the women. And we also have a cadre of women who are digital sakhis or this kind of women grassroots leaders who help other women to use the digital platform. So I would stop here and say that if something is simple, is useful and affordable, our women can take it up. Now it is not affordable. And the usefulness is not, the idea of usefulness has not reached. There's a myth around there's a myth and also a fact about the other usage of digital platform, the risk associated with it.
Thanks, Sanchita. And for the rest of the people, I would also like to highlight is that there are 5 very essential sectors that actually impact every person's life, but more in rural and poor areas. And that is education, of course, number 1, finance, livelihood, health, and of course, government entitlements. Incidentally, all this has a huge 2 face. One face is that it can really connect you and give you a very cheap access to all these 5 services in a manner that Tamsil also explained, Sanchita explained, and not having this is the risk that Anya already explained, how. So I want to just put 2 lines. One is that, when I look at the rural India, I see we have right to education, but no access to education. We have right to health, but no access to health. We have right to government entitlements, but no access to entitlement. We have right to finance, but no access to finance. We have right to health, but no access to health. So, we have rights, but no access. In urban India, where we are connected, it looks like we have all the access, but looks like we don't have right because we don't have data rights, we don't have privacy rights and things like that, and which was bothered. So I will come back to Anya to explain, in the absence of data and privacy rights, how really do you think that in the datafication world, where every person is a data and every platform is a data capturer and every government body is a data capturer, how do we really, these citizens, actually save themselves or think of their right, which Sanchita said that, do we have our human rights still existing, or do we have a right to find out that what are you doing off of my data or my information and things like that? How is it going to spread out without my right?
Thanks, Usman. I saw also in the chat, there was a very concrete question, like, can you talk about approaches to digital participation? But I think the kind of question like what you ask now is really important, because before we look at digital participation, we need to look at the digital and participation. And this is why I keep coming back to these questions of architecture. Because if we don't design things in a way that are inclusive, like everybody who's worked, say, in participatory development knows this, no? The design of your program is essential to what it's actually going to deliver and how inclusive it's going to be. Now that we're changing the structures of our society, is exactly the same thing. And when it comes to the digital, I think the next question to really look at, and which builds on what I said earlier, is the question of what is data actually? So at the moment, we are looking at data as a resource. That's also how it's reflected in government documents, right? It's something that's just out there, ready to be mined, existing independently of whatever medium has generated it. You just need to collect as much as possible, and then you will be able to do all kinds of things that the assumption is will by definition benefit society, right? That's also why Tamsil said, like, the startups in India are frustrated because they don't have access to data, while companies that were first movers like Amazon, Facebook, etc., sit on heaps of data. The thing is, if you look at data as a resource in that way, then actually in the context of India, not yet having a data protection law in place is almost the logical conclusion. Because if data is a resource in that way, which has not that much to do with people, which is kind of always at a remove from us, then obviously, if you have a country that's big enough to rival the ecosystems of the US and China, and it's the only other country in the world that can do this, you want to give free rein to this, no? If data really is a resource, why shouldn't you? And then, of course, the data protection concerns are important. But if you look closely, I mean, it's been withdrawn now, but even the earlier version of the data protection bill, it wasn't so much a protection of rights. It was a framework that put into place the rules businesses had to follow. And this, again, I think from the perspective of the Indian government, Indian businesses, since broadly in dominant discourses, we think of data as a resource, this makes complete sense. So for me, this is not a surprise. If we want to shift it, we need to start thinking about data differently. Because what we notice is that in our experience, it's not just the resource that's out there ready to be mined. I come back to this example of the Safai Karmacharis, right? The matter of dignity and the matter of efficiency are very different data. There are also very different elements of how you look at this entire infrastructure, right? And for the sanitation workers, this the digital devices that they have, including like watches, digital watches that track their movements, they are like shackles that are actually restricting their movement. This is a physical experience. The way they experience it is as a limitation on where they go, what they do, and how free they are. It's a completely different level of where our rights are affected. You see the same with Adar, right? It's so interesting, like the ration shop owner might know that you are who you say you are. They might have known your family for 30 years. But if the system doesn't actually say that your data confirms that you say who you say you are, the fact that you're standing physically in front of him means nothing anymore. And I'm giving these examples to argue that it's not just that we have a data avatar, as you put it, Osama. It's not just that we have a data body. It's that our physical bodies are now so intimately connected to that data that actually that line is not relevant anymore. And so we should stop looking at it as something that's somehow separately from us and really recognize that these two are connected. What happens with that data and how that data is treated and what can be done with that data will affect fundamentally what we can do and how we can be as embodied physical human beings, how we can move around in the world, what we get access to. And so in the case of Adar and all these people who died because they didn't get access to their rations, even a matter of life and death, that's how far these connections go. And so when you rethink datafication from that perspective, and you start to think about rights and how they apply to people who are embodied, and you include data as part of that embodied experience, you start to think about policy in a very different way also. I'll give you one really easy, straightforward example, but I can give many more and also many more nuanced and complicated ones. But one that I think makes it really clear is, you know, women or sexual and gender minorities who have been victims of the non-consensual sharing of sexual images. Almost everywhere in the world, this is seen as a privacy violation or a data protection violation. When you speak to the people to whom this has happened, they talk about it as a harm that's similar to sexual assault. It's a bodily integrity issue. And actually, there are court cases in India now where judges are starting to recognize this and also starting to recognize that the fact that that image often stays up on the internet, no matter how much you try to take it down, is actually repeated experience of assault for the woman involved. Now, imagine the physical harm that comes from that, even if there has been no, the psychological harm that comes from it, even if there hasn't been any physical contact. But in most countries, sexual assault is defined in such a way that there needs to have been physical contact. And so simply because this is a datafied representation of our body, we're not able to recognize that harm. It's just one example, but really, I think if you start to look from the perspective of communities, how data impacts them at the moment, whether they know it or not, because Sanchita, when you said that they don't even know like the power of Adar and what goes beyond it, so this is exactly part of the problem, no? How can you really engage meaningfully with that system and ask for it to be constructed in a way that really benefits you if you don't even have at that level an idea of what is going on? But so if we rethink it from seeing bodies and data really intimately connected, the architecture is going to look very, very different.
Thanks, Anya. I think what you basically highlighted is we need to have a proper design digital design of how it should play a role in our life. And the example that you gave, I have a very strong telling example of a girl in West Bengal was trafficked through mobile and actually rescued through mobile, both. First she was lured through by giving mobile to her, then tracking her number, and then chatting, and then calling somewhere, and then gradually trafficked. And then after getting trafficked, she was not having access to anything. And then finally, she found mobile from somewhere and messaged back towards her area, home, and all that. And that is how police retracked her and rescued her. So this is the so data is certainly not only oil, it's a DNA as well, I guess, in the new design system that we need to figure out. I will go to in the circle to Tamsil, and I would like to let him lay out this examples that you were giving in terms of platform and content and all that, and the proliferation that is happening. How do you think that it can actually be if you look at MSME is a huge area, but I'm sure you know that MSME is also includes 85% of the numbers of the percentage micro and nano entrepreneurs, and they all belong to a very creative industry like craft and handloom and folk and whatever, it. And that is also the area where it requires a huge challenge of how do you skill them, how do you get it adapted, how do you really think that this technological invasion is actually going to take to be coming as an opportunity for all of them to adopt it, but adopt with consciousness and not adopt as a consumer, adopt as a citizen and not adopt as a consumer and take advantage of it.
So I'm just gonna pick up from Anya's point on embodying data as such a powerful way of looking at things, and just to talk from, and also the point that Sanchita mentioned about it being a human right, and then these are those couple of things which combines anyone to become a digital citizen, right? Instead of just having access to resources and dependency. And one of the most interesting experiences, so in the last 4 years, we've possibly trained more than 150,000 people on various ways to use digital and see how you can actually get livelihood through storytelling, right? And seen various benefits and behavior change that have come either in their own life, either as them as an individual earning livelihood, or to their businesses, right? And these are mainly connected. A lot of them are these nano micro entrepreneurs. A lot of them are people who did not even know that they could use digital like that. And if I divide it between urban and rural, and one common thing is people who get access to a smartphone for the first time, I think the lack of awareness on what it means to access various platforms is really huge and at multiple levels, right? Right from how you need to use a platform, what are those ethics, to where is your data going, what is safety protocols? These are we are far, far away from even understanding it in urban areas than even rural areas, right? I think the whole idea of talking about sharing of explicit images, it's such an important point, because I just got back from London, and this is a huge topic of debate there. How does it connect to a person's human right? What is the harm that is being caused by it? Until there is an offline incident, God forbid that actually happens, that's the only time it is referred to in a different way. And these are all these factors that all of us, even present on, as audiences as well, have put in efforts to train people to use digital in some way or the other in a good way, right? But there's a massive, massive gap, and it needs consistent training. And that's something that we've seen, which is very, very important. The second is the user experience and the interface of the platform. So I'll give an example, right? Self-help groups in Bihar, everybody tried to put in a lot of effort to see how they can be onboarded on Facebook groups or Facebook. Very difficult for them to access that platform because it's such a complicated platform with a lot of lines and text coming in. I mean, for me, it's complicated. I don't use Facebook anymore. But looking at a platform like WhatsApp, Looking at a platform like Instagram, Moj, ShareChat, these platforms really made people easily use them, right? And they're penetrating through the market where the first adoption that we're seeing is platforms which are more visual in nature, right? Are really encouraging people to onboard them. And I think that's a great starting point to really enforce how they can use them effectively. I mean, out of the whole population, be it urban or rural, how many people are actually even harnessing these platforms to see how they can get an income? In my opinion, it's half the population is constantly struggling to cater to trend-based algorithms to see how they can get a following or influence on social media to be able to earn an income. That's the first start of inequality. I don't think the 0.01% of people should define how social media should be used. And 99% of people need to think that there are other ways to earn an income. You don't necessarily need to have a profile to just get followers to see how many people are going to your business, right? And to give an example of, before I get to that, and then there is a population of urban and rural which is collaborating to create beautiful, beautiful experiences. So to give an example, young people who are amazing internet users and social media users are really enabling businesses which are not discovered to be discovered by Google businesses, right? And that collaboration, understanding of ethics of really using the internet, understanding safety protocols, and really visualizing it. You're not just shifting a traditional business to digital. The kind of opportunities and flexibility you have on these platforms is massive. Just to give an example from Jeevatam, you have a woman in Kashmir who's able to do 3 to 4 different gigs, right? At a point where she would even imagine sitting at home, she could earn just 2,000 rupees. She's able to earn 20,000 rupees a month by 4 to 5 different gig platforms. Where at a point, she can never even think of earning a penny sitting at home. And these are things that COVID has really put forward. The amount of doctors who are converting their clinics into virtual clinics after COVID is unbelievable. What are the ethics of the medical journal? How are they changing? Because these are the questions that health professionals constantly keep asking. These are businesses that are transforming the way people use them. A doctor can see more patients, double the patients than they can in the physical world, right? And these are things that we really need to keep in mind. When it comes to specifically small businesses, if you look at the work being done in South India, of how a lot of Kirana stores are being onboarded online and how they're selling it, I'm an optimist. Okay, that's my toxic trait, if I have to put it like that. One of the big things that I see is platforms like ONDC are really going to give opportunities to a lot of people in a decentralized way. The biggest challenge these platforms will face is how do they manage a decentralized way of doing it? Is it how do they spread awareness on what digital rights are? They're evolving, they're changing. I think the new protection bill, if it does not include how digital rights are transforming, it's not going to be there. I mean, we've seen how European societies and UK, English societies and various people, I'm not going to count America in this, they're protecting their privacy in a very different way, keeping law in mind, individuals themselves, businesses are making sure the language used, people understand where the data is going to be used. We're far, far away from it. And we have like a plethora of first-time internet users. Imagine the load we have to spread awareness. We still haven't been able to do it properly.
Thanks, Tamsil. Optimism comes through your delivery of speech and everything. So no worries on that, and we will take that one. Sanchita, I wanted to ask you one thing. Is that, I mean, we also work a lot with women and try to include women in digital, but there is this whole approach of digital the way it is going. Even though it is pervasive, it is going very strongly, and a lot of people are adopting. What do you think is the main reason of women still lagging behind in all aspects of adopting the technology or adopting digital? Is it because there is a design fault, or is it because we don't know how to push it to them, or is it because of the patriarchal nature of the country? You are muted.
I think it's a combination of all in various proportion. First of all, when I was saying that the usefulness of a digital platform or a digital tool is not known to the fullest. Secondly, the digital tool itself is not available to the women. And when you talk about our kind of women, definitely the patriarchy system, the social norms, everything has its role to play in creating those barriers. The situation has changed now. At least one family has one smartphone, but it's not always with the women. The ownership is mainly with the men. Secondly, there is also an apprehension, and sometimes rightly too, about the risk that a digital platform can bring in. There is not sufficient or a proportionate engagement into show how we can avoid these risks. So that kind of knowledge is also absent. So, and the digital tools that we have, the mobile, etc., are expensive. It's not affordable. Unless they're affordable, unless there is a subsidy, it will be very difficult to reach all the women. So, and I think we should also have leaders who can talk about its usage. There is one point means there is an access, the other point is the usage. So even if you give access, the usage part is inherently missing. So if we have, like you have, I was also thinking like polio, I consider as a very successful program because it actually penetrated to the doorsteps, not only with the knowledge, but with the means. You had people going to each and every place. Then you also had Amitabh Bachchan ji also talking about polio, do bund. So if you have a combination, one a kind of a personality who talks about this, the other you have feet on the street who are actually giving those access. Or during lockdown, it also proved that maybe physically it may not be possible, but to have those kind of a message through radio, through TV, through other mobiles or a community platform, it would definitely give more access to people and more access to the women. So I think these are points that we need to also talk about. And also I would say that if there is a gender lens built in the policy, then I think there will be a real push. Till now, this is I think largely absent.
Oh, Sanchita, you just snatched away the line that I was going to use in the last round. So I would say we are heading towards ending the session as far as our contribution is concerned. I would like all of you to use 2 to 2.5 minutes, max 3 minutes to this round, and I am going to focus only and only with digital inclusion and gender and women perspective. And all three of you have to give 3 different perspective for 3. The reason I'll also give you a very personal reason. For the last 20 years, we have been working with digital inclusion all across the country, thousands of locations, millions of people. And I have learned that digital is best in the hands of women. It is economical, it is risk-free, it is contributory, it is powerful, and it's also highly impactful in multiple stakeholders inclusion. So we have experience, we have research paper on this one. And then coming from that background, I would go and ask Anya that how do you think that we design digital design so that it should be more equitable in terms of adaptability? And the same question to Tamsil, how do we design digital inclusion to have more women participation in business and adaptability of creative industry and creating more content by the women and from their perspective? And to Sanchita, that how do you think that we can have that 50% population have actually more than 50% users contribution? Because it is also very important to know that the more women users would be, the internet would be much more safer. And that's what I believe. And the reason why it is also not safe is because there are less number of users. Coming back to Anya to this question, and then one by one, 2 minutes each. Yeah. Thank you.
Osama, I'm not sure about design as such. I think Tamsil has already mentioned perhaps the most important thing, which is making things really visual, often helps for low literate populations in general, and definitely for women who, as Sanchita has also pointed out, right, are often uncomfortable simply with dealing with the technology. And that's also, I think, because of how we speak about technology and how we construct a relationship between women and technology. And actually, that's something I very briefly want to say something about. I think we need to be really careful also about how we talk about tech and gender and the language and the values we use. First of all, there is a narrative nowadays about risk and safety that makes all technology seem like extremely unsafe for women. Not helpful, because in a way, what we also see is that apart from cost, social norms are really important across South Asia in restricting women's, the uptake of technology and mobile phones in particular among women. The GSMA Foundation, who does these recurring studies on the gender digital divide, found that between 2020 and 2021, mobile use by women in India increased from 21 to 30%. And that was a significant decrease of the mobile gender gap. From 21 to 22, it remained at 30%, while men's uptake continued to grow. So the gender gap is growing again. So at the beginning of the pandemic, there was really a moment where more and more families said, look, if we can remotely afford, this is so important, now let's do it. The fact that it halted points to something else. Cost might be a factor, but definitely also, if social norms are so important in restricting both access and, as Sanchita pointed out, usage, we have to be much more careful about how we address questions of harassment and violence through technology against women. I'm not saying to ignore it, but at the moment, the way it's talked about at such a dangerous space actually really restricts that further rather than empowering. The second is also when it comes to usage, I think we need to support girls, young women much more in exploring technology in the same way that boys do. Because again, by playing on all those spheres about safety and security, girls are supervised much more, and they are also restricted much more in where they can go and what they can do online. And for people to really become comfortable with technology, to have those levels of comfort that Sanchita pointed out they're missing right now, you actually need to be able to do that. All of us are comfortable with tech because we've been loitering on the internet, so to say. We randomly run into things. We download an app and think like, oh, this is cool. Is there more like that? You're playing all the time. If you don't get the space to do that, then this is not going to move. And maybe one other concrete thing I want to say is, I do also think we need to think more about how we can incentivize this through policy. And maybe there are some good lessons to learn from, say, gender and land rights, gender and education, both two big issues where we have seen that actually often indirect incentives can really work to encourage a family to, for example, enroll a girl in school. So with education, we've seen not educational incentives, but the midday school meals were crucial to getting enrollment of girls in India up massively. Now, of course, we're losing those gains because when education moving online, there are no midday school meals to be had either. So I think we need to look more at those kind of incentives as well, indirectly, since targeting social norms heads on is really hard. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I was also meaning from the perspective of, let's say IT Act, how many people are, the members, are there women in designing them? The policies when we are designing, most of the time we don't have women participant or edtech when we are designing, or whatever. Most of the time we miss it. And like you said, it's very important to also design these things from technology, gender, and education, technology, gender, and livelihood, technology, gender, and finance or business and things like that. But thank you very much for that, Tamsil.
So from what I would say, the most important integral incentive I've seen, which is the most powerful thing, which is so critical for power shift, which is so critical for breaking patriarchy, which is so critical for breaking gender norms that exist for years, is financial independence. And that's the strongest incentive that can actually be given. And we've seen, I think, one of the models to definitely study, and it's the most beautiful thing, and it evolves every year, it evolves every month, is the Jivika Bihar model of how financial independence has led to new types of leaders, or how the shift in the farming sector is happening when women are farming, how they're diversifying farms, how they're running the farms and increasing business at the same time, making sure they're providing for the family in a more economical way. And these are learnings that really need to be taken from an incentive perspective, where financial independence leads to power. I don't think anything else matters from an incentive perspective when we specifically giving digital rights. The second learning, I think what we've seen also is how the projection of power when women come in, and a lot of creators we have who are women from marginalized sectors, when they actually tell their story, and we see when they tell their story from the lens of power versus from the lens of really having control over that story, we've seen that story inspire a lot more women to be able to do the same thing. And there's a connection over here that comes in. If a business owner, a woman business owner, is able to run a business and you see power through success, and you see power coming through a lens of a story that you're seeing on your phone of someone who's telling that story really powerfully, I think it inspires people to really encourage that change from a norm perspective, right? And this is where I think a policy and behavior change can combine in a really strong way, where policy and awareness can combine. So in my opinion, I think my strongest point is, if the incentive is not financial independence, anything you do is not going to last for a lifetime.
Thank you. And Sanchita, what are your last words?
How
do we take digital in the hands of all women and stop men to work?
I have quite a few last words, because this digital platform I'm definitely going to use. We strongly feel that for any kind of research, planning, or decision making, we should include the women from the community, whether it's a SAG leader, ASHA worker, or a rural school teacher. So that is very important, and that will also give a direction to the design. 2-3 recommendation. If it sounds wild, forgive me, but if there are any takers, I'm using this platform. Subsidized loan for women to buy phones so that it becomes affordable. I've also given the name to this product, phone pay loan. So this, so this can be used. And I've seen when the government acts on a mission mode, it happens. So I'm asking the government to take this up. Third is, we already have the CSCs, common service centers, and the CSP model, which the government's opened and it's doing quite well. And I think internet service also should be a service that should be given to the community. It's like a community service. So can we use the CSC centers and the CSP centers to give a community internet service? This is one, I think, if we want to explore. The last is something, we have this Made in India. So if we have Made in India by women for affordable phones and use in India by women, I think we can bridge the other part of the gap.
Wonderful. Thank you. Phone pay loan or loan pay phone, we will decide.
That also loan pay phone.
and yeah, I mean, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I just want to also end by saying that in each sector there is women institutions. For example, there are about 3 million elected panchayat members. Half of them, or more than half of them, are women. Can they be targeted with digital design? There are 2 million ASHA workers. Can the digital inclusion be designed from that perspective? There are, almost half the teachers are women, and in government schools, can the digital inclusion be designed from that? Out of 320 million students, half of them are girls. Can the digital be designed from that perspective? So in each institution, there is existing institution in India, but we do not design digital inclusion from that perspective. And what Sanchita is saying is that I'm just going to tier that even if you want to reach to each one of them by phone, you still have an option. Can you tier this into two parts? One is institutionally, how do you target and design? And then individually, how do you target and design? With that, thank you very much, Praxis, for making this platform. This is the first conference that I have attended where the number of people have increased over time, not decreased over time. So, which is fine. I think that's a sign of our good performance. Thank you very much. And let's take up some questions. And I might be needing some help from Tarini or anyone to read them out.
Yeah. Thanks, Osama. So I think for now, we just had a comment, which I think Anya also had looked at the start. So, but we'll open up the floor. So if anyone has any questions, you could please raise your hands and we can also just unmute you for you to ask it directly. Otherwise, we could move to Tom. So I think we'll give it about 2-3 minutes for anyone to raise their hands if they have questions. Shishupalji, if you want to just unmute, I'll.
Hello, sir. Actually, I belong from a rural background, and I would like to know, actually, as I feel there is actually gender bias within the family using technology. So what is your actually experience to, fill this gap? So can you please share your actually experience?
I don't know if I take advantage of being a moderator to reply that, but if anyone wants to reply, can go ahead, and I'm happy to reply as well. So Shishupalji, we have discussed, this, there is a family bias, there is a domestic bias, there is a cultural bias towards, we always think that any asset that comes into the house, the first right to use is a male or men or something like that. So वो तो लड़ाई आपको अपने घर में खुद करनी पड़ेगी. You will have to do that at your home yourself. You have to start from that one. Or you can also come to my home where my girls are using more phone than my boys. So we can give that as an example. But having said that, we need to really, turn this around at an individual level, at a domestic level. This bias cannot be top down. This bias can be fought bottom up. Like institutionally, I will give you 1 or 2 examples. Is that when we work, for example, DF has got 2,000 location presence with Suchnapreneurs. So what we did after first few hundred, we changed the scheme that we will not start even a single Suchnapreneur. Suchnapreneur is more like common service center without women. We created it as a scheme. We told that only girls are allowed to take this. So when we go to the village, people come, oh, mere bete ko le lijiye, take my son, this will be better, or this entrepreneur is better, wo bhag daud karega. We say that this scheme is not available for men at all. This is for women only. We are looking for women. So that's the first cut itself. But when they see that, okay, this is a kind of scheme, this is already decided, what can we do? Then somebody comes, okay, take my daughter, take this one is smart, this one is a good entrepreneur or something like that. Similarly, we remember we had about 6,000 phones to distribute last year. At the time of COVID, we converted them into a public access point. Again, we created the same thing, that this center will run by only women or girls. It is not available to men. And then we realized that it is advantageous because more women come to the center. More women are accessible. Older people feel more comfortable when the girl or a woman is running a center or a public space. And also when she earns, she takes the money home to be utilized rather than men who use something else, and then only the leftover money goes to home, and so on and so forth. So in every respect, it actually converts into better result. So those are few examples, but I can go on, and we don't have too much time. You can take my contact and our contact. You can get in touch, and we can also tell you how to deal with this entire bias.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
If anyone else has any questions, you could raise your hands, or then I'll hand it over to Tom. So I think, Tom, you can come in. Okay, sorry, Tom. Just before now, sorry, Hema has a question, so I'll just ask if you want to unmute yourself. You could just raise it yourself.
Yeah, this is just as I wrote down. I had a conversation with an artisan recently, and she had just begun to use Facebook, and she attended some programs, and she was very happy to be able to use WhatsApp and Google Pay. But she said, I find something like Facebook a very, very slippery slope, a tricky place. And for the reasons that I have written down here, when she meets customers individually, the interaction is very well and very nice, and they become Facebook friends. And she starts promoting her products, and she also gets the news feed from other people, and that's where she gets very confused, because she's also a consumer of their views and many other things. So it's not only about using it for the purpose that you wanted to use, wanted to be useful. It's also many other things. And I think it needs some kind of depth navigation. And well, I didn't know what to tell her. It's not a question really, just a view.
Yeah, thank you for sharing those comments. I think, this kind of things can go a long conversation because of all kind of people are there, all kind of people are your friends or contacts, and all kind of messages keep coming. So this can go into many socio-behavioral related question also. I don't know if Tamsil has some highlight, but since you already said it's not a question, we take it more as an experiential thing to learn how, again, these platforms could be designed or treated. Can there be a tutorial? Can there be, how do you recognize? This also goes into media information literacy. We don't know. Media is in our hand, but we don't know how to handle media. Information is in our hand, we don't know how to handle information or the character of information. So there is a whole framework and chapter and curriculum on how do you treat media information literacy, how do you learn. For example, I was talking to one person whom we were talking, do you know this kind of information come on WhatsApp and you should not believe it? And the person said that, kya baat kar rahe hain sahab? इतना मेहनत से किसी ने लिखा है तो सीरियस ही होगा ना, हम इसको कैसे भूल जाए? ये तो जरूरी चीज है. If it is so, what the person meant is that if somebody has dedicated so much time in drafting that message, it cannot be unbelievable. It has to be believable. So we come with all kind of biases and all that, and because of which we treat this, and the person forwards it, and every friend who get a forward thinks that my friend is a hero and he is forwarding, so it is believable. So it is going to long conversation and long thing. I can go on and on this, but the short word for this one is that all of us who use devices must learn how to use media information literacy or go through the entire course of media information literacy.
If I can just add a point, Osama, I think, Hema, the big thing is, I think it's like not understanding of some tools as someone who's launched a page. How can you restrict those consumer views and those questions that you cannot see? I think that's one thing. Double thumbs up on the design of Facebook. But I think in this case, it seems like understanding how you can make your business very targeted instead of knowing the information you're supposed to know. So I think that's just a tactical thing if I had to add to that.
Can I add something also, Osama? I do actually feel Hema's point is really important. It's important in the sense that when we talk about, say, participation, inclusion, closing the gap, we're often very focused on, like, let's say, providing a business opportunity or providing financial access. The point about the digital is that once you get online to do these things, you generally don't exist in a vacuum. And the fears that people have in your community about the technology are often not about that, like the banking app, that very specific thing. It is about that larger social environment, which is more anonymous. It's less clear than in your village who you are interacting with exactly. There are conversations you can have without others knowing in ways that you might not be able to do in your own community, etc., etc. I think it's actually really important for us to be aware of this and take that into account in all the initiatives that we do. So I think that the point Hema put forward is really, really important.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you all. And we also have some students from the Asian College of Journalism. So I just ask you all to unmute and you can go ahead with the question.
Hello, I'm Tanushka from ACJ, of course, and thank you so much for this discussion. It's really been very informative, and there are a lot of new things that I got to know, but I have, of course, a question. So Sanchita ma'am spoke about access and usage and how they go hand in hand, and Anya ma'am spoke about, can you hear me? Am I audible? All right. So Anya ma'am spoke about right versus access. So when I think about this entire digital paradox, what comes to my mind is that I am someone who has access, right, as well as usage awareness as well. And yet I am someone who also lacks a good amount of knowledge in terms of, data privacy and things, specific things like cookies, or like Sanchita ma'am spoke about banking and banking on digital platforms. I don't think so. I'm someone who would have a great deal of knowledge on the same. So considering that I come from a place of these three things, having these three things, and yet I have a shortcoming. Comparing this situation to people, rural women, there's a huge disparity. So my question is, does this come down to awareness at the end of the day at the grassroots level? And this awareness at the grassroots level, so basically how long would it take for, say, digital crimes, for example, trafficking, to come to a more regulated or controlled place? I hope that I've been able to get myself clear.
Anyone?
I'll just make a comment. What is your name? What is your name? Tanushka. Tanushka, I think the awareness level also we have not reached at your level or my level. We are not 100% aware. So the rural women, I think it's another layer, but the awareness even we do not have. The rights is also something that has not been designed to the way appropriately that has to be used. So there are gaps in various places, and together only it can serve that purpose.
Can I add something? I also think part of the problem here is really that we are putting too much of the burden on the user. And that comes again with my point about how the level of architecture is so important, right? So like in my previous organization, the Internet Democracy Project, we looked at consent on the internet, which is typically one of those things where, I mean, even I try to read privacy policies, etc., not just tick. And there are places where I also think, oh, chuck it, no time right now. And also places where I think I'm not getting this and I'm supposed to be an expert, right? So I think all of us do this. We take that without actually knowing what's going on. And looking at the connections between data and bodies, we try to reassess how consent is designed, thinking from how feminism has dealt with consent in the context of sexual relationships. And what are the principles that feminism came up there? And if we would apply those online as well, what would change? And one of the crucial things that feminism says, of course, is that for consent to be meaningful, there has to be a more or less equal power relation. right? So let's say in many colleges, universities, a relationship between a student and a professor is not allowed. This is not because there cannot be genuine love and affection. It is because there is a recognition that that power relationship is so unequal that it's too risky. So if you want to do this, wait until you graduated, not now. On the internet, these power relationships are completely unequal. We have no power as users over, we have often no option to go somewhere else. We have no idea what really happens with our data. In India, actually all over the world except Europe now, your data can just be sold to third parties who again sell it to third parties. And as a user, you are supposed to read all of that. So basically what consent here does is just put all the burden on you and saying, yeah, but you agreed, right? Which is a little bit like saying to a woman, yeah, you wore a short skirt, right? We're asking for it, what? So again, I think we really need to think about some of this will never be solved by awareness. And the fact that even people with I have a PhD, I'm not getting it. I mean, how much more education am I supposed to get to be able to function on a daily basis and be informed? So there are things that at the level of the architecture just have to be made illegal. Third-party data selling, unless it's essential to the service, should be made illegal, if you ask me. But of course, that the business models of these companies will also have to shift, which is the challenge at the moment.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. We have about 2 or 3 more questions. There's one from Rahul on when we talk about increasing digital participation, we should also talk about digital protection mechanisms, especially in India, as the risks are quite high. Any thoughts on protection mechanisms in the online space? So I think a lot of you have already picked on a lot of points related to this, but in case there's anything you want to add to that. Otherwise, I can go to the next.
Yeah, I think we have discussed that a lot, protectionism and all that. But I just want to add one line is that protectionism is also going to be a huge challenge from the perspective of ease of users' access to knowledge and information about using the device and the platform and everything. At the moment, we give all the information. For example, we give all the information to Facebook. Facebook asks your habits, your hobby, which movie you like, and if you go to your biodata, you literally ask each and everything, how many relatives you have, what's their name. So each relative is connected and all that. We have given all the information, and and then after that, somebody pings me saying that I am a friend of your this relative. You figure out, how does this guy know? Because it's already there in about info. We have already told that which movie you like, and somebody pings you and say that, oh, I know you like Fox movies or Netflix. You said, why the hell this guy? How the hell this guy know? I haven't met him. And you say, and he actually says that which is my favorite movie, which is Forrest Gump. And then, oh my God, I have not told it to my best friend also, but you have told it to Mark Zuckerberg, who has told to everyone. So, it's very interesting that how we behave and how do we adapt the platform, how do we function, what rights do we give to the platform, how much access do we give to the platform, and then figure it out. So that's the reason I said that getting online on data is a whole media information literacy. Every one of you need a PhD in media information literacy to be comfortable and protected online, apart from the rights and apart from the law that can protect you, which is still not there. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure if anyone wants to add anything. Otherwise, I can move to the next question. The next question is by Shantanu. Shantanu, maybe if you want to just unmute and ask yourself, you can go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Tarun. Basically, a very general question drawing on, I think, specificating, Kamsi talked a little about. The question is that I wanted to get a sense from each of you that where is technology really headed? Okay, a small comment here that I want to make based on which this question exists is, so we are consuming internet and digital in a variety of ways. Again, I'm thinking in terms of income generation. There are a whole range of mediums. Platforms, as it seems now, are working. The cases that we are seeing so far, to me at least, it seems all those cases of where you see people earning 30,000, 40,000, etc., are outlying cases at best. And platforms, in their structure and design, they're exclusive spaces. They are always meant to aggregate value to the people who have designed that platform, and to a very, I would say, marginal extent, the users of the platform who are using it to, for instance, generate income. Right? Platforms are again loaded with biases. When it comes to interoperability, we have seen UPI being successful so far. ONDC, it seems, is another effort in that direction. So a variety of things are happening. I only want to understand, get a sense from all of you, is where is the technology headed? What should we expect? Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Tamsil, would you like to take this?
Sure. I think one of the big things, Shantanu, is that more and more people will have access to these platforms. That's something that we cannot ignore. If you take examples of UPI and the way it was implemented, I think it's just amazing how fast everyone adopted them and how fast everyone's getting dependent on them. ONDC is following very similar learnings, but competing with a different market. I think what we're going to see is in India specifically, there'll be a very stark division between pro users and first-time internet users. The kind of challenges we will face is going to be very different from other countries, right? Right from the way we question how pro users are using the internet and social media specifically, because that's what everybody wants to get into, right from the way they're consuming content, buying products, selling products, and at the same time taking education, all those things, right? And there's going to be a stark inequality that's slowly going to be bridged, but this will increase when there's more access to technology. And I think the efforts of awareness that are also spreading on how to use these platforms safely are not at power with all the other platforms. And I think at the speed at which technology is going. But the big challenge that I think, if you know, a lot of platforms and a lot of startups and a lot of companies are facing, there is a stagnancy. Once a platform reaches critical mass, right? Let's say if you have 5 crore users, you can't go beyond that, right? It's very difficult for you to, 5 crore users is a hypothetical number. It's very difficult for you to go beyond that user thing because you have less people using platforms for those purposes. So there's going to be like a lot of new skill-based businesses. Gig economy is going to be huge from a technological perspective. We've already seen its impacts happening in smaller cities like tier 2 cities, especially how sharing economy apps are being used, especially how they're selling on e-commerce platforms, especially locally made platforms that are getting really popular there. So I think it's going to be a great boost to livelihood. And at the same time, a lot of prioritization will be given to flexibility. And I think looking at a lot of conversations and speeches from a toxic positivity and optimism angle, a lot of preference would be given to women specifically on how flexible income is very important. So I think that's something where it's headed towards. I'm particularly excited to see the success of ONDC because this will be a global learning if this platform is successful to decentralize it.
Great. Thanks, Tamsil. We have last three questions. I think we'll just stick to these and then go forward. So I'll ask Karthik, whose hand is raised, if you could go ahead with your question.
I would like to ask, suppose for connecting community to digital networks, if we gave them access and trainings and all, after a certain period of time, everything might become redundant. How can we make communities self-reliant and less dependent on organizations which are working on the ground for the first time digitally? This is my question.
Sanchita, would you like to take that?
I think I need to understand the question. Can you just clarify the question, please?
My viewpoint about digital, anything digital, it is dynamic. It's not stagnant or static. So every time something changes in digital network or platform or anything, then all of the users we have connected in the rural communities, they might not be able to be updated with it. So how might we make them self-reliant instead of depending on someone else to teach us what we should do, or again give some training or something?
It's a very interesting question. First of all, I think the problem that we need to crack is to changing that digital behavior through various topics that we talked about. If we reach that platform, that means there is one step that we have accomplished. Any change in technology or any change in the way or any digital intervention, I feel, this is my understanding, I feel probably at that point, they will also be able to create and understand those changes themselves. Secondly, if it has to really reach more and more people, so we should have some kind of an interface like a grassroots leader or the center to teach more about. So I think more and more teaching and adaptation will occur simultaneously.
I also want to add that most of the rural population know the cost of SIM card because it's directly affects their kitna sasta milta hai. They usually, you don't have to update. They usually change the SIM every month, every 2 months. That information reaches very fast. But when WhatsApp changes its policy of privacy, it doesn't really reach them very quickly. Or whatever that comes on the screen, we say yes or something and go ahead, and we don't know what we have given. So it all comes down to actually more aware about how comfortable and how quickly are we comfortable with the devices we are using or the connectivity that we are using. And I think it will take a lot of time.
I think if I could just add like quick learnings from existing platforms who've used very different ways of doing this, is Jivitam being one, the way they've been onboarding people and providing livelihood is really transformational, and at the scale they're doing it is very different. Misho, the way they've onboarded a lot of businesses is really different from a lot of other platforms. The techniques that are used for onboarding and making sure that the users are updated is very different. The same goes for Moj and ShareChat. This is starkly different from all the big tech platforms who have been reaching out to rural populations for the first time. And I think now they're getting inspired to reach out to people in hyperlocal languages. In my opinion, if as people you've onboarded on a platform, it's the platform's responsibility to make sure you're using it in the safest possible way and using it to the full advantage, which I think is not happening in a lot of other in a lot of big tech platforms and the way it should happen. So these are some learning ecosystems that can be picked up.
Yeah, thank you all. I just wanted to check with you all if you have time for 2 more questions. Otherwise, we can always email those to you. So depends on you all. Sorry, Osama.
We'll have to leave.
Sure, we can just.
I'm saying if we depend on the email, it might be forgotten, so it might as well just finish it off in another 5 minutes if possible.
Okay, sure. I understand Sanchita ma'am might have to leave. Yeah, sure, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you
so much for your time.
Bye, Sanchita. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay. So we have a question from Tarak. Tarak, you could just don't see him anymore. So that also reduces our question. The team from ACJ, if you want to unmute it. go ahead.
Yeah, hi, hello. My name is Ushmayo. And so I had a question in regards to how would you think digital economy is going to change, since the nature of internet itself is changing, right? Because we are at the thresholds of social media, internet, the Web 2, and we are heading on to a more Web 3 kind of an internet where everybody would have control over the stuff that they're posting on social media. Right now, we are at the later stage, in a sense that people, whoever had to make any sort of income from social media, are becoming influencers, they have YouTube channels, and from which they're making their money. So how do you think that digital economy, where to it's headed towards? And also in regards to architecture, I would like to know how should we look at the state, since we are also talking about power. So how should we look at the state, keeping in mind that the state has accumulated so much data, so much forensic architecture, it's there on the internet in the hands of the state. So how do we look at state and economy while heading towards the future? Thank you.
So my very honest answer is that that's an elective subject question to have a 1-hour lecture in your college by one of us who can be invited to reply that.
I can say something about the state part though. And it comes back to the question of Shantanu also, where I was thinking when he asked about platforms, right? I was thinking in his question, there also seems to be a distinction between the more commercial platforms, whether Indian or foreign, and platforms that have been built by the government, that were essentially a government initiative. And I think that's an important distinction because they have different objectives, right? As I said earlier, if you look at data as a resource, the Indian government would really be amiss not to maximize on the opportunities that exist here. And even if you look at it as interconnected with the body, I still think there is something here that the state has definitely a role in. And I think some of these initiatives are actually really positive examples of how they are taking that seriously, right? So like ONDC, all of these open platforms that they are trying to build, I have a concern with how all of those start very much from this idea of data as a resource. Some of the policy documents of the government even talk about data as a national asset. And if you actually see data as connecting with the body, then obviously the state talking about people as a national asset in that way, where they have so much insight and information and control over you, is a bit scary, right? But I think the broader idea behind what they are doing is actually really positive, because they're trying to build that ecosystem where data flows more easily to different actors and where Indians can really benefit, Indian startups, Indian companies, Indian people, from the data that is generated within the country. As platforms and as ways to organize technology, these are two different things, and it goes in different directions, and there is tension between those as well. Tensions between big players, small players in the private sector, between foreign ones and Indian ones, etc. And even within the government initiatives, right? The earlier initiatives being more centralized and that backfiring in a way, with like Google having been able to benefit so much from UPI, for example, that players like Paytm were almost pushed out of the market, or at least the market share reduced massively. That was not the intention. So now there's more decentralized models. I think this is a really interesting indication. I mean, all of what I'm saying is basically pointing to these two aspects of the relation of the state and digital economy, right? Where on the one hand, there's a lot of really positive things happening. I think India is really breaking new ground here. It's pushing boundaries. There's a lot of innovations, new ideas, things being tried out, and the government being conscious of the fact that if we set up this infrastructure, there are amazing things we could do. There is not enough thought about those connections with the body, what that means for broader rights, and what that then means about how the relationship between citizens and the state is fundamentally changing, right? So to give you one more example, facial recognition technology is being used more and more by the police in India. There's a lot of acceptance for this. But there's also evidence now, for example, that they are using it in protests to screen out habitual protesters. There is nothing illegal about being a habitual protester. Why would you need to be surveilled if you go to protest regularly? If those protests have been approved by the police? The right to protest, to have those demonstrations, again, is a guaranteed right in India. This is part of what it means to be a citizen. And if you happen to go more often than others, as long as you're not engaging in violence, there is actually no reason why the state should be allowed to surveil you. So I think this is kind of, again, pointing to that tension of the way the government builds the infrastructure, I think is very valuable. The lack of thought about what it does to people's rights and the way it reconfigures the state and citizen relationship, or the limited way in which that is thought about, is concerning.
Well, I'm happy to add on Web3, if that makes sense. I'll quickly answer it. I think one of the big changes that we're already seeing as more and more people are getting into Web3 is a lot of changes are happening. For example, creator economy, really separating social media platforms from creator economy platforms, and more creators wanting to do their businesses on their own. I think the way blockchain is being implemented, let's say in a lot of sectors, even in India, like how I think Pune has adopted it in waste management. I think it's amazing to see how blockchain is one of the technologies that are being used by a lot of people, and it's something which is getting really, really big. When it comes to Web3, the Web3 adoption rate is still pretty slow in India, but I think a lot of learnings that are coming in from, I personally feel the toxic optimist in me would feel like if we are able to say that if we post anything on any platform, we should get paid for it. That's the thing that we should think, because the amount of income that is being generated as on you as a user, on you as a creator, is much higher than the money that you receive. So that's my what do you call it, the unicorn vision, which can happen. But I think a lot of changes are happening in the way how people are looking at it. Ad-based creator economy is obviously really prospering right now, which only the 0.01% are getting benefits out of it, but the 99% are rising. I think, like the way Sanchita mentioned, that we should have leaders like Amitabh Bachchan, but we will have a lot more leaders who are in rural India who are taking benefit of this. We've already seen examples of it happen on ShareChat, Moj, and slowly move on to big tech platforms. But creator economy platforms are going to change the way people tell stories on the internet, and at the same time earn revenue. Plug TV, which is a platform I run, is one example to take a look at it. But yeah.
Great. Thank you all so much for such an engaging conversation. It's been amazing. I'll just hand it over to Tom now. Thank you all.
Thank you, Tarini. It's been a very, very enriching conversation. I just want to thank you all for joining us today. And I really don't think we could have had a better way to celebrate our 25th year than to have this engaging conversation with so many takeaways. I think you have done a brilliant job of elaboration of the opportunities, the challenges, the big brother, and more. And I think you also underline this importance, or that the architecture of how digital is envisioned is critical. Like poverty and marginalization cannot be understood without understanding the structural causes underlying that. It, in a sense, underlines the fact that we are adding more layers to an already faulty structure, and reinforcing while the marginalized communities have been attempting for centuries to break out of these shackles. So I think the one takeaway is that the challenge for us as development community is to think of how we could have more disruptions. You've mentioned some, how we could have more disruptions that can provide that much needed liberative opportunities on multiple spheres. I think that is a big challenge for us. That's something, there are opportunities out there which you were outlining in terms of be it artificial intelligence or machine learning or whatever, the technological bedrock of this digital movement that we can also capitalize on. And I think it's important for us to keep looking for liberative potential of this technology. I think that's something which you've underlined so well and so in so many detailed ways. Thank you so much for being with us and sharing all these thoughts. It's been really, really engaging conversation. Thank you.